The Ministry of Health has confirmed the first coronavirus case in Kenya.
Coronavirus 2019, otherwise known as COVID-19, became a global pandemic threatening the very coexistence of humanity. With close to 7 million deaths and about 1 billion cases, the world was literally brought to its knees. The pandemic quickly ravaged various sectors, having a significant impact on education across the world, with learning institutions including universities being forced to close down to prevent the spread of the virus. The closure of universities resulted in significant disruption of teaching and learning activities, which had adverse consequences on students, lecturers, and university administrators. Specific university objectives such as research and knowledge production were not spared. Against this backdrop, the Partnership for African Social and Governance Research completed a 2-year project aimed at strengthening equitable access to quality higher education during and beyond COVID-19. With the project now in the final phase of dissemination and policy engagements, the Partnership for African Social and Governance Research organized a 2-day national conference in Mombasa, Sarova White Sands on 30th and 31st March of 2023.
Somebody wrote me a WhatsApp message that I would like to share with you because it provides one of the 3 contexts for this meeting that I would like to speak about. He wrote and said, I am currently in my 4th years taking Bachelor of Economics. Online studies wasn't working for me, so I traveled to Canada to study cloud technology and information security. That was a student in a university here. When COVID came, he says online studies was not working for him. So he traveled to Canada to pursue some course. So he traveled to Canada to go and look for physical learning. Statement number 1. Statement number 2, and Patricia will know this statement. As part of efforts to establish an open university, one of the critical conversations, Patricia, has been, how do we guarantee people quality? How do we tell people that anybody who goes to an open university is receiving the same quality that they will receive in a Lupe University? Statement number 2. Statement number 3, and Dr. Halima Saado will be alive to this conversation as part of the Presidential Working Party. How do we integrate technology in higher education? Colleagues, those 3 sentences in different contexts provide the rationale for the conversations we are going to have over the next 2 days.
The conference brought together key stakeholders in higher education sector in Kenya to engage with the research findings and undertake policy dialogues around policy recommendations from the research.
We conducted this research in the last 2 years, and we sought to find out how was the higher education sector in the country affected by the pandemic. And we focused on 3 thematic areas. We looked at resourcing for equitable access to higher education. We looked at the postgraduate study and the future of academics. And the 3rd theme was on the opportunities for public-private partnerships.
The convening brought to light the challenges that the higher education sector faced to ensure a continuity in learning amidst COVID-19 pandemic.
So my first question to you, before we strengthen, in what direction did access to quality higher education move during the COVID-19 pandemic? Did it move in the positive direction or in the negative direction? And what accounts for that? So that we can worry about whether we strengthen or not. So in 2 minutes, if each of you could then just let us know.
Thank you so much, Professor and the other team members. It's a good question for all of us and it's food for thought. And I'm sure each one of us has experiences to talk about. And I can say that the first thing is that even before COVID, we still had issues of access to quality education, quality higher education before COVID. And when COVID came, this was actually, it increased. So I can actually say that one way it moved to the positive direction because the issue of access increased. As we have heard from most of us in the positive direction, it increased. That even people who could not be able to access the quality education were able to do that, especially those who are in the working places. We even had a person who had for many years desiring to defend the proposal and he was able to do that. And then on the negative is actually as you have seen from that research, is that the access to those gadgets and the internet. So I can actually say it moved to the positive and also to the negative. I rest my case.
The conference created a rare platform for stakeholders in the higher education sector to engage with the research findings and recommendations through group works, panel discussions, and presentations.
Going forward, we have to start thinking about how to make sure that universities here can withstand the shocks that might come. Today, this time it was COVID-19, next time it might be something else, and I think we are seeing that already with the emerging technologies, ChatGPT, for example, which are disrupting the ways in which teaching and learning takes place in the universities. So it is important that we have this particular conversation. And as we think about the policies that we might want to put in place, it is important that we hear what the stakeholders are saying. And stakeholders includes the universities who are here, and they also include researchers, and they also include students. They include everyone who is, involved in higher education sector.
The first part of the study was to look at access, and for our study, we were measuring access by looking at the number of sessions that the students successfully attended and completed, and also we were looking at the kind of tools and platforms that they used. From our analysis, we noted that 47% of the students only attended 50% of all the scheduled classes. Now note that we were asking them in terms of the percentages of classes that they had attended, and it is only 47% that we noted attended 50%, and only 7% attended all the scheduled classes. So you can see from an access point, as much as online learning was going on, not all the students were able to complete their classes.
In order to cushion the higher education in Africa, and Kenya in particular, against such severe future shocks as was experienced with COVID-19, a generation of critical evidence around how universities experience disruptions was needed.
And as you begin to enjoy the infrastructure, the issues here is that there's very low confidence in assessment, which is a very critical component of postgraduate studies. Because you cannot talk about postgraduate studies without finding out how you assess the capacity of students to be at that level, because this is a level at which now you are beginning to form a scholar. But the presentation has indicated that there's some kind of very low percentages that you look at. So in your respective ways, beginning with the professor, the disruptor, how do you disrupt this low, in terms of assessment? Yes, Prof.
we have 2 lessons for assessing students. We assess them for learning, in order for them to learn, but we also assess their learning. Have they learned? What have they learned? Sometimes we overemphasize assessment of learning at the expense of assessment for learning. At the end of the day, we are interested that the student learns.
Of course, the teaching online is straightforward with courses which do not require practical classes, but where workshops and laboratories are required, there is some challenge there. But they could do the coursework and then come to do the practicals later, or in a way that the social distance was going to be maintained.
This evidence is relevant in informing policy interventions and programming to cushion the sector in event of similar disruptions in future.
The emergence of e-learning, and we continue to learn a lot out of it, we realize that we require then to supply these students with gadgets or devices so that they can be able to attend classes. Already, the Act is very clear. We are supposed to provide financial intermediation for student requirements. So today they might require a book, tomorrow they require an e-book, the other day they require a laptop, the other day they require bundles. So we are supposed to know where that is supposed to come from. That is explicit from the Act.
One of the interesting things for me that has come out is that postgraduate students actually preferred doing online classes. This was especially during the pandemic, which is opposite to what undergraduate students preferred. Because you find that undergraduate students prefer to be there face-to-face, that collegiate environment where they are meeting with their friends. For the postgraduate, the needs are very different because as you're doing your master's and PhD, you're more or less self-driven. You're more or less, it's more or less a more lonely path to take. So the collegiateness and that kind of need is reduced with the postgraduate student.
For you to be able to engage effectively in the virtual platform, you need certain gadgets. You need a phone in the list. This should be a smartphone. You need to have a laptop, which is the best or the ideal infrastructure that you might need. You also need internet and bundles and a seamless internet, an internet that is stable. Now, from our study, we found that most of the students who engage in online learning were not able to have all these things. So from one of the research findings was that less than 50% of the students who engaged in online learning were not able to complete and attend all the classes.
Key to this is one, encouraging and enhancing and if possible sustaining public-private partnerships in terms of one, capacity development. Now in terms of capacity development, we did find out in the research that some of the resources, especially human resources, were not well prepared to teach during COVID pandemic. For instance, there were cases where some people had actually to take some unpaid leave specifically to stay away so that they not be able to teach.
The other issue that arose, which was also an opportunity, it was a challenge at the beginning, but also an opportunity, this quick transition. You find the faculty as well as the students, they are not really prepared for that. But something has happened that disrupted the norm. And they had to either, someone early on said, like myself, in private universities, you really do not depend on the exchequer. You rely on the student. So lack of them means you are out of business.
In some instances, it would take a very long duration for these partnerships to be put on paper. With proper collaboration and discussions around this, I'm sure the process can be streamlined in a way that it is able to be more responsive, because let's say during the COVID duration, if an institution, a private institution would like to bring in technology to a public institution, you might find the process might be really lengthened so that it is not maybe really responsive. So with proper discussions around this, maybe the process to be shortened.
I think the other thing that has come out is that access, especially off campus, requires partnerships. Partnerships with the mobile operators, partnership with technology providers. So there were many types of partnerships that are used to enhance access to quality higher education. And especially there is a partnership that is normally ignored, which is the partnership in building the capacity of faculty to teach with technology.
I would say we also incorporate the role of research in finding out what is it that is working and what is it that is not working, and how can we then create solutions from the evidence that is available.
One of the policy areas that PASGR might have to go into properly in terms of research is the issue of public-private partnership. It looks like we are talking about many things coming on board. Infrastructure, ICT infrastructure is not cheap by any standards. Technology is expensive, very, very expensive. And as technology becomes expensive, it behoves us as researchers to ensure that there's a proper mechanism in which the public and the private sector can work together so that there is proper funding of the policies that can ensure public-private partnership in provision of ICT gadgets and other infrastructure that can in place.
The conference achieved its objective to disseminate research findings and provide a platform to interrogate and deliberate on the evidence and policy recommendations emanating from the research evidence.
One of the things that PASGR needs to look at is the whole question about financing of higher education. There's been a huge conversation yesterday. How do we finance higher education? Especially how do we finance postgraduate studies? That's a key issue that has come out. The second thing that has come out is the whole question about, so how do we strengthen quality? While it was a topic, I think it's still something that requires to be worked on much more. What's the whole mechanism of quality strengthening? What are the quality assurance mechanisms in light of online training? They need to work on that. I think the last, which is not something to research on, but something to work on, is I think there's been almost unanimous agreement that we require pedagogical training for universities. It is assumed that the moment I become a professor, I know how to teach. Because I have a PhD in law, I know how to teach. This conference, I said, no, you must, it's one thing to have content, it's another to have pedagogy. And PASGR used to have a program on PEDOL, which has all been said by everybody else, extremely useful. So can PASGR be able to ensure that they partner with universities, they partner with Q in a sustainable manner to be able to support the process of pedagogical training in university? I think that's a huge need and something PASGR needs to work on.
We were able to look at policy, we were able to interrogate the classroom scenarios in private universities, in public universities, in constituent colleges. We were able to even see from a student point of view what's up as a student.
This study was unique in the sense that it was like a community of practice. Quite a number of people were involved, and the idea was, and I don't know whether we also were influenced by the idea of the African way of doing things, umoja ni nguvu, utengano ni udhaifu. We therefore wanted to go as a team on each of the phases of the project that we were involved in, and I think it worked well for us.
Participants drawn from the local higher education stakeholders comprising of Ministry of Education, the Higher Education Regulator, university leadership, the Higher Education Loans Board, researchers, lecturers, students, civil society, and the industry fully represented the true state of affairs as far as higher education during and post-COVID-19 is concerned.
To address these issues, there is a need for public-private partnerships between public institutions, universities, and telecommunication companies. Companies like Safaricom, Telecom, Knet provided affordable data solutions for both students and lecturers. But a policy framework is needed to fully leverage the potential of PPPs in higher education. This will ensure that universities are better prepared for future shocks and that students have access to quality education regardless of their socioeconomic status.
With this, Africa stands a great chance to shape the higher education sector, hence securing the future of the planet.